Robin, Bob, would you please identify yourself that you are present for the recording?
Robin Hunter, present for the recording.
Bob Springer, just present, as usual.
Thank you both very much. Kate, citizens speak. Do we have anybody who's asked to be recognized? They may or may not be able to see because they're on the phone.
I have not gotten any emails, but if there's anyone on here now that would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Looks like we are good to go, John.
Good to go. Thanks, Kate. First item of business this evening is a gentleman named Peter McGowan, who is our chief of police.
That would be me. Thank you for having me.
That is you. Thank you for being here.
You moved on my screen, Chief. You were here and you moved there. I was so confused.
Would you like to disclose your whereabouts this evening, or are you going to keep that a state secret?
No, sir, a state secret. Always a state secret. So I come before the board today, once again, with a personnel request. It seems like once I get someone replaced, another one retires or transfers or what have you. And we just got Colin Young out of the academy a month and a half ago, and Officer John Cash, who's been with the department about 27 years, retired at the middle of February. So we are looking quite aggressively for help, as is every department in the state. And we were lucky enough to find and meet up with Jeffrey Lynch. Currently he's a Boston police officer. He's with Boston Police for 16 years. He's currently assigned to District 18 in Hyde Park. He's had multiple commendations for his work. In addition to patrol work, he's served in plainclothes and has recently been promoted to district clerk. He's toured the station. He's spent some time in town. He's met many of the officers, and we all think he's going to be a great fit. So where he's fully accredited and experienced officer, the normal stipulations of just completion of the medical exam and drug screen are all that would apply in this case. There's obviously no academy needed, just some field training and getting them up to speed with 911 for dispatching. And we hope that he'll start in mid-April and be ready out on the road to meet people sometime in mid-May. So very shortened process for us, and I think this may work out.
Thank you, Chief. And Mr. Officer Lynch is not with us on the call this evening. I can't
Correct.
see his name, so I think he was calling in. So what's a district clerk? What is that?
He helps out the lieutenant and captain with some of the paperwork and booking and scheduling and what have you, in addition to his patrol duties.
Nice. Robin, Bob, questions?
Oh, it sounds like this was fortuitous meeting.
It was actually. It was
Right.
very limited applications, and all of a sudden his resume dropped onto my computer, and I went and met with him in Westwood, and very low expectations, and I was thrilled walking out of there, hoping that we'd be able to land him. And he had interviews with 3 separate departments, and chose to come to us.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when that happens, because when you do find good people, you just know. I think this is great for us.
Right.
Especially, we know how tight the job market is, especially with police officers. So
Right.
yeah, this sounds fantastic.
Yeah. Can't wait to get him on board.
Bob?
I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed that the chief's right, that this thing just continues to roll downhill and we get a good guy and we're off to the races in May. That'd be fine.
That would be great. That's the plan.
Is John had his last day, Coach? He's
Coach?
Chief.
Did
I've been called for it.
Did I just say Coach?
You did.
Holy shit! My apologies.
Whoop, whoop.
There's a
Hey, where's the beeper?
Kate, better get the bleeper.
There's a backstory there. I'll tell you offline. Wow.
Anyways, yes, Officer Cash left in the middle of February.
Got it. So I move to appoint Officer Jeffrey Lynch to the Dover Police Department as a full-time officer, subject to the completion of the Dover Police Department stipulation, and ask for a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor, I, John Jeffries.
I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springer.
You know, Chief, with all the retirements, we should do a Board of Selectmen Police Department coffee or something so we can meet some of these new people.
Sure. Actually, I was thinking, I think I've hired 10 or 11 of the officers that are with us now. So it's been quite a run.
It really has been, yeah.
I used to know everybody, and now, when I look into the cars, I don't always know everybody.
Me neither.
Hey, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it makes me feel better or worse, but thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Wow. Let's item 2. Ford, welcome. Kate, welcome. I did see Jim.
Yeah, there he is.
He's there in his glory.
Jim, how are you?
And the chief, we have our
I'm over here.
yeah.
There you go.
We'll swing it over.
Yeah.
Are we on?
You're on. You're up.
Mr. Chairman, I am Ford Spalding, Chair of the Board of Fire Engineers, and with us this evening, as we said, are engineers Jim Dolly and Kate Canny. And to provide you with more information about the fire and ambulance services in the town of Dover is our chief, Paul Lutazzi. Before I turn the meeting over to the chief, I want to explain what the Board of Fire Engineers does, and it's very simple. By acceptance of state statute, the board is responsible for the budget and appointment of officers, and that's it. The board and the department wants to acknowledge, first of all, the 45 years of service to the department of former Chief Craig Hughes. At this opportunity, Craig joined the department on July 4th, 1975. He served as a dedicated member, lieutenant, deputy chief, and chief. And we just want to express our appreciations to Craig's entire family and for Craig's service. With Craig's passing, the Board of Fire Engineers really spent most of 2021 fulfilling our appointments, because when the top person leaves, it just cascades down. So we appointed last year Fire Chief Paul Lutazzi, and filled other positions like the deputy chief, the captain, and 2 lieutenants. And it's a very different process that's been in the past because we're following the town personnel guidelines. So it was a time-consuming process. So now let me turn this presentation of the Board of Fire Engineers over to the Chief, Lutazzi, and he can talk about the department's operational responsibilities and activities. Here we go.
Well, we can finally see.
Yeah.
Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Paul Lutazzi, Fire Chief, good evening. Thanks for having us. I'd like to start by publicly thanking the men and women of the Dover Fire Department, especially EMTs, for their professionalism throughout the COVID pandemic. They really stepped up for the town of Dover. The Dover Fire Department consists of 42 paid on-call firefighter EMTs who respond from their everyday life when needed. In the last year, there were 270 fire calls and 267 EMS calls. The firefighters that serve our town are trained 3 to 10 hours a month.
That's the fire department signal going off. So
Okay.
we may have to leave.
No, we'll be all right. Okay, firefighters are trained 3 to 10 hours a month with a monthly meeting and occasionally a Saturday drill. Saturday drills could consist of vehicle extrication. We've had med flight out on Saturdays. And then, so those would be like the weekend drills. The firefighters also are encouraged to attend the Mass Fire Academy. And currently we have 2 members of the fire department at the academy taking their firefighter 1-2 certification. At this time right now, we probably have maybe almost 50% of the members are firefighter 1, 2, maybe not quite that many, but we encourage them all to go. And we just finished in-house training our 6 newest members. This is a 50 to 60 hour process done by officers on the department that are trained in training officers. The EMTs train 3 to 10 hours a month as well. They have in-house training where they go over calls, keep up with any state protocol changes and updates. And with the COVID, there were a lot of updates and policy procedures changes with the pandemic. They too go to required hospital training over through our medical director once a month, and then they have a biannual 20 hours of recertification for their EMT as well as CPR. They too are paid on call and respond from their home or work to respond to the ambulance to help the citizens of Dover. Our equipment out there, as you know, it's great stuff. It's well maintained and cared for thanks to our in-house maintenance program by one of our firefighters who's been doing it for several years. And then over the past 2 years, as Ford had mentioned, we have appointed a new chief, a new deputy, a new captain, and 3 new lieutenants over the past year. So there's been a lot of changes, as well as 6 new firefighters and several EMTs. Right now, currently at the town hall, we have updated hiring procedures, which town council has, and they're reviewing at this time. And following that, we have policies and guidelines that we would like to adopt as well. And as you found out today, we've applied for a grant for an AED, which we received today. So we'll move forward with that. We also were asked to help out, I shouldn't say help out, but the town of Sherburne applied for a grant which would involve us in Holliston. And if that grant goes through, then we will be able to train through the state a few of our firefighters in the level of Officer 1 and Training Officer 1 as well. And the diesel exhaust system that was approved last year will finally be being installed within the next 2 weeks, so I was told from the vendor. I think that's
it.
That's what's going on here at the department. Any questions?
There's a lot going on. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for.
Yeah, you know what? They're doing a great job here. You should be proud of them. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, all right.
Sure. Thank you. Kate, Jim Dolly, anything you'd like to add?
No,
I just.
So, Kate, please, you go
No,
first.
you go first, Jim. You go first.
Oh, well, no, the chief was very eloquent in his remarks, and we stand by them totally. Thank you for allowing us to appear before you this evening.
And
Coach Jeffries.
And I would just like to say that, you know, the town of Dover is very lucky to have citizen volunteers serving us in both the capacity of firefighters and EMTs. And we definitely benefit from their dedicated service.
Thank you. Very, very well said. Robin, Bob, comments?
Well, actually, you know, Kate's comments reminded me of something. We are really lucky to have volunteer firefighters and EMTs. So how many do we have, and are we concerned that we don't have enough to support the needs of the town?
No, that's a good question. We're currently, you know, we're always looking for volunteers. We have some members that reach out to other people in town through community services. Deb Ryman works at the school, gets a couple, you know, she sees a lot of people, a lot of parents, things a lot like that. We advertise at Dover Days Fair, and we have it on the Firefighters Relief Association webpage too. But it's working.
Okay.
Yeah, we do worry about it from time to time. I mean, we get college kids that come home, which helps out. But it is a thought. It sticks in the back of my mind every day. Every time that phone goes out, like it just did now.
Right.
You know, I mean, like you said, these people are coming from their home, and I mean, the they get paid when they come, but they got to commit themselves to the schedule. So,
Right, and they have to, they have to be around, and any volunteers that I know, both the EMTs and a fire, when they're sort of proud to serve on call, and they stay at home when they're
yeah, they put a lot into it. The certifications for EMT, it's not just come down and do it. They have state certifications. We have policies in house that they have to sign for, and they have training. It's a commitment. It's a couple nights a week. Not a couple nights, excuse me, a couple nights a month. So.
Yeah. So I do know, like, I have some friends whose kids are coming home for the summer who have EMT certifications. Is that something that the town's interested in over the summer to temporarily hire somebody?
We do have kids at college that come in and do it, but they still have to follow our guidelines, because we have a medical director that requires us to go to rounds, which is up at the hospital. We have in-house training, and they have to make 50% of that throughout the year. So I mean, it's not just I'm home for the weekend. I want to do it for summer. That's it. It's either all.
Okay.
It sounds good, but it's a job. It's a job.
Okay. All right.
It's a commitment. Yeah.
No, so that's really good to know.
Yeah. No, we are fortunate. We have some great people on the department, especially the EMTs.
Yeah, I would say if you know somebody, Robin, there's no harm in them contacting the chief and telling them what they're doing. And
absolutely. Yeah.
I can remember a young person that was on our department, and at college, he served as an EMT in the town that he was in for 4 years. So he did both. And he is now actually a firefighter out in Colorado. So.
Oh, that's cool. All right. Yeah. No, because one person in particular whose daughter is an EMT in the town she's at school and is certified, wanted to come home for the summer and wanted to do that. So should I just tell them to contact you, Paul?
Yeah, myself, or they can go on the website, get my email.
Okay. All right.
That's probably the best, or if the Firefighter Relief Association website might have our coordinator, Tim Surgeonor. He'll take to everybody and fill them in.
Okay, that sounds great.
Go on. That's fine, thanks. Yep, glad to hear from him.
Bob?
Hey, thanks, John. You guys have been at it for quite a while. Fortunately, I can say I haven't had too much interactions with the fire department, which is probably a good thing for all.
It's a blessing.
That means you have not been cooking dinner.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, forget it. If I was cooking dinner, they'd be living with me.
Exactly.
But my experience. You mentioned COVID, Paul, and we had a COVID task force for about 18 months, and I was dealing with Tim on a weekly basis. And I would have to say, I think the town overall did terrific, but I thought you guys did great.
Thank you.
It was just, the caring, the preparation, the response, all the things you really want from a service organization. You guys got AAA. It was sort of, it sort of goes under the radar unless you're directly involved. Yeah. And I guess that's the good and the bad.
I agree with that.
Professionalism, that you guys showed was just first rate. It was terrific.
They stepped up to the plate. They did.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Really did.
And emphasizing the points that you made about additional training and particular protocols. So it does sound like you guys have had a sort of a busy period post-COVID with a lot of reorganization stuff.
Well, through COVID, it was a little slow because people didn't want to go to the hospital. They might have stayed home, but we were ready for the call. They still are. It's changed the way the EMS runs moving forward, and they've adapted great.
Bob, as you look at the town report, and we every year put in our number of calls in, it's pretty steady. Been pretty steady over the years, both for ambulance and fire. And then we also have the component with Dave Taberry of doing inspections. So that's another part of the department.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's always, we made we really wanted to have people come and tell us what's going on, and not just us, but have it on audio and video so that people can actually understand what makes Dover Dover. And quite often it is volunteers who do professional like work,
Right.
in their spare time. And so that's just, I don't know if it's unique, but man, it's pretty cool. So thank you all very much.
I will add, it is volunteers who get paid on a call basis, but the alternative is a full-time department. And if you think about a full-time department, the cost is going to be incredibly high. Yeah. And that's something we should really work to strive to prevent. Because volunteerism, as you and I have talked, is hard to find today. So we just need to keep our eye on the ball. And as Paul says, you're constantly out looking for people because we don't really want to go to a full-time department for the town's taxpayers.
Yep, got it. Again, thank you guys. Jim, how you doing?
Better, thank you. On the mend.
Good.
I can attest to how well our EMS system and our police officers respond, and they did a job. Outstanding. But thank you, Bob.
That's
Thanks,
great.
John.
Thank you, Bob. Jim, you look great. Seriously, I'm glad to hear that. So.
It's delighting.
It is.
Thank Jim, you. You're going to use that for a long time, aren't you?
I didn't swear too, just to help you with that one.
Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, great to see everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well,
Chief, thank you.
Take care, guys. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
We are going to move to our next item. Our town administrator, Chris Dwelly. Chris, we have the proposal for the financial reserve policy recommendations developed this year by the Capital Reserve and the General Reserve teams.
That's right. Thanks, John. I do have a few quick slides that I want to share with the board this evening. It's the same slide deck and presentation that you saw a few weeks ago at the warrant committee's open hearing. So while Kate brings that up, I will I'll just jump right in with the introduction. So the board is very familiar with this. This is, I think, culmination of a multi-year effort with many parties involved to help build out a broad-based reserve policy for the town. John, you helped spearhead that effort a few years ago with members of the warrant committee and capital and the board of assessors, and then Bob and Robin took that work and built on it, and have developed out what is before you and before the town this evening. So just to quickly highlight and recap for everybody, the impetus behind the development of the reserve policies are the four main points that you see here on this slide. They are to maintain reserves to protect the town from emergency situations, using reserves smartly, primarily free cash that is currently in existence, to help pay for planned purposes and known liabilities, to limit spikes in the annual tax rate, and to provide for clear and transparent accounting of our reserves year to year. I want to take a moment to just emphasize and call your attention to the diverse group of people that, really representative of the different policymaking boards that worked on this effort this year. Robin helped lead the capital side of things with Barry, the capital budget chair. Cam Hudson from the warrant committee was there, and we were joined by some staff members, our finance director and municipal project manager. And then on the general reserve side, Bob helped lead that effort with Melissa and Andy from the warrant committee. So it was a really, it was a good group of individuals with varied perspectives and experience that helped shape out the policy that I'll show you or that I'll summarize in the next slide. So Kate, if you will. So at a high level, there are four areas that are recommended priorities. The first is around general reserves, and again, ensuring that the town has general reserves set aside and targeted to ensure that the town is protected from any emergency situation. The second is smartly and proactively and strategically funding our known liabilities. In particular, the regional schools OPEB liability, that is the town's responsibility. The second area is the community center debt relief, which was discussed and presented at last year's town meeting during the special town meeting for the community center bond issuance. The third point is to support the town's capital needs. And the fourth is to utilize free cash smartly to help stabilize the tax rate. On the next slide, there's a little bit greater detail in each of these categories as to why they were chosen. So the first is on the general reserves. And in particular, the goal is to maintain a target of 8% in our general reserves. The 8% is going to be split. 4% of that will be held in a general stabilization fund, which is a dedicated fund. It's called the rainy day fund. Think of it as a savings account for emergencies. And the other 4% will be maintained in free cash. The idea behind the split there is that there are different kind of voting mechanisms and timing related to how you can access those funds. The general stabilization fund requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting to be able to utilize that in an emergency situation, whereas free cash is a simple majority. One interesting thing about free cash is that while the general stabilization fund is always available, so long as we get a vote from town meeting, free cash is unavailable to a municipality at the end of each fiscal year until you have closed your books and the free cash has been certified. So essentially free cash becomes unavailable for a certain period of time throughout each fiscal year. So that was something that was important to the group to make sure that there were funds available in emergency situations. And I've highlighted some sub bullets underneath there as to why it's important to have a general reserves. Things like ensuring that we have a high bond rating, which means that we pay less for bond issuance, just like with the community center debt issuance. It's a recommended best practice. And it helps us maintain service during times of financial concern.
And Chris, I think in the benchmarking we looked at, the target was between 8 and 15% for combined to maintain a high credit rating. So this is by no means at the higher end. It's actually at the lower end of the target.
Yep, that's right. That's a great point. Thanks, Robin. The second area is around the regional schools OPEB fund. So the town smartly a few years ago and the board put forth a proposal to start to set some money aside for the retiree health insurance liability that we have for our school employees and teachers. So that liability currently stands at $13 million. And so as we start to fund that liability and as we start to receive higher assessments from the schools each year to fund that assessment, we'll be able to tap into this OPEB fund, which will help pay for that, which will in turn help reduce the amount that we need to raise on the tax levy, which in turn reduces spikes in the tax rate.
And one of the things I was thinking about as another strategy for next year or maybe the year after is as interest rates go up, these liabilities go down, and maybe it's worthwhile taking some of the liability off the table by funding it with annuities, which is something large pension plans do sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be something, because then you're not subject to the fluctuation in the interest rate, so you can basically hedge a little bit.
Yeah. And, just on that, Robin, one of the things I'll just mention, it's later on in the slide deck, but what's nice about the proposals as they've been structured is that, there's some flexibility in here that we're able to revisit them each year. Right. So it's not like we set it and we can't touch it and make changes.
Right. And Chris, I think that's a really important point to continue to make. You're not going to lock yourself into a policy that doesn't make sense anymore. So you really need to look at it every year and say, or does this still make sense? Should we change it? Should we wait another year? What external factors have changed, and are there other things we could be doing?
Yeah. On the next slide, Kate, just continuing on with the other priority areas, the community center. This again, we incorporated what the Board of Selectmen proposed last year during the special town meeting, and that was to use $4 million over 10 years to reduce the overall debt service costs for the community center project, which we've carried through and put into these policies.
And just as a reminder, because my brain's a little mushy, that $4 million, is that just residing in free cash, or are we going to set up a specific fund for it? I just can't remember what we decided to do.
It's just residing in free cash.
So the 4% target, does that include the $4 million that we're planning to use when we look at this target of 4%? So I guess the question I'm trying to ask is free cash higher now since we've set aside this $4 million to use?
Yeah. No, so the 4% of free cash is strictly considered general reserves. It's 4% that the town will only touch in cases of emergency. And then the remaining balance of free cash is going to, or is planned to be used for certain priorities that we're outlining here, including the $4 million over the 10 years for the community center.
It just when we're presenting this, it may be helpful to maybe put it in a bar chart of sorts where you could just show people what the components are.
Okay. All right. The next item is on capital and funding annual capital expenses that are in excess of our 1.5% levy contribution. So as the board presented last year, was the creation of a capital stabilization fund. And part of how that fund works is that the town will commit 1.5% of the annual tax levy to go to recurring annual capital. And what the group did at the time was they projected out over 20 years what our anticipated annual capital amount would be. And it was right around the 1.5%. And so in years where our capital requests are lower than the 1.5%, the difference between the capital request and that 1.5% contribution would go into the capital stabilization fund. And then in those years where your your capital requests are higher than the 1.5% levy contribution, you would take the money out from the capital reserve or capital stabilization fund to pay for capital so that it all lives in that one area. One of the challenges that we had when we were structuring that is that we have a very atypical next 3 years of capital requests that are very high. We've got a lot of roof projects ahead of us, turf fields, things that are high dollar amounts. And so we're not able to fund those within the existing 1.5 levy contribution or within the capital reserve fund at this point. So what was decided upon or recommended by the groups was that we, two things. One, we fund the overage of the 1.5% in the next 3 years with free cash. And then also we look at borrowing within the levy limit for larger, higher expense projects to help level out the amount of free cash being used over those few years.
Right, and that, I mean, we went in circles with this because we also back-ended, we also said, well, what would you need as a seed investment in your capital stabilization fund so that you didn't go into a deficit with the 1.5%, and that was $2 million, and there wasn't wide support for that. So we only got $600,000, which really doesn't help given the 3 years of roof projects that we have facing us. So we did, when we were looking at these, we did say, well, you could fund it all. If you funded it all today, this is how much you put into the fund. If you don't fund it all today, you're faced with a deficit and you have choices as to how to fund that deficit.
Yeah. And then the last area is around free cash to stabilize the tax rate, which has been a past practice of the towns. And we've talked about this over the past few years, and how using free cash to reduce the tax rate can create spikes in the tax rate in future years if you don't continue to appropriate the same amount of free cash. And so, as one of our goals is to reduce spikes in the tax rate, we've incorporated essentially a drawdown of using free cash to stabilize the tax rate, so that it doesn't create unnecessary spikes in future years.
And then, Chris, the other thing that we've done since you got here was we used to always maximize the levy. And we said, let's see what we can do from a budget perspective to reduce the amount of free cash that we constantly generate year after year. So there were a number of things that you and your team put in place. One was more trend budgeting, which has really helped. And we've seen that over the last couple of years. And the other thing was, a recommendation that came from you and Carl was there's no need to maximize the levy. So that helped too. So we're basically addressing it from both sides of the equation. We're addressing the cause, and we're figuring out how best to allocate the excess surplus that we have for projects that we know we need to do in the future.
Yeah, it's a great way to phrase it. So those are the recommendations, and some of the kind of the sub bullets and the detail behind the reasoning behind the recommendations. The next slide just details out what we spoke to previously on the capital reserve and the mechanics of it. So I'll let this sit here for a second, but I won't speak to it since we've already addressed it. But it's here for viewers to be able to get a better sense of how the capital reserve works. And then on the next slide, which is our second to last slide, we just, for the people that...
Oh, you got it bigger.
Yeah.
This is great.
We know everyone the devil's in the details, and everybody wants to kind of see the numbers and how it moves over time and what that impact or what the impact it has on the total free cash balance. So we've displayed that here. The very top row is either our certified current year or projected future years free cash balances. Underneath that line where you see the fiscal years listed are the free cash uses, or all of the priority areas that I had just mentioned and gone through. And then the first red line is what the projected free cash balance is after appropriating to those priorities that I just discussed. Below that red line shows you our reserve balance year over year at that 8%. With the 4% in free cash and the 4% in general stabilization. And then the very bottom line is essentially I don't know if the excess free cash is the appropriate term for it, but is the remaining balance of unappropriated free cash. And then the last slide just touches upon a couple of points that we've talked about during this conversation.
Chris, I'm going to bug you one more time. Can you go back one slide?
Yep.
So the 2.7 or 2.8 million is the free cash. So that means it's sitting in free cash and not in a stabilization fund. So if you were, and that's where all our free cash is today, we have very little in the stabilization funds. So should you be adding these two numbers together, the 2.8 million and the 3.5 million, to get to that 8% that you were talking about as the target?
No, so the 8% is just so it's the 8% of prior year revenues, which is essentially the second to last total cash reserves bar there. And then what we've done is we've taken that number and just divided it in half so that you get 4% between free cash and general stabilization fund. I will highlight that you'll see the general stabilization fund balance year over year progresses higher. And that's because we are not just, there's only $1 million right now in the general stabilization fund. So we are, instead of going right to the 4% this year, we're going to do that over a 3-year period to grow up to that target of 4%. But no, based on the priorities that were recommended by the groups, we should hold 4% in free cash, 4% in general stabilization, and then any unappropriated free cash just becomes unappropriated free cash on the balance sheet.
Right. So my question is, because, people like, I did have, after the open hearing, a couple of people comment, what are you guys doing? You're really reducing free cash. But yet you're saying that we're still fiscally really responsible, but you're decimating these balances. So the question to me is, should these two numbers be added together or not?
I think that is a departure from the recommendations of the groups. I think that's a question for the board and for the policymakers. I think, to the comment about decimating free cash, what I would say is that, for years, the town had this and has had a large balance of free cash, but it has never been strategically set aside for various purposes.
Right. And that's what I tried to tell people. But I think, when you look at this, that's all you see.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think, the most important thing, I guess there's two important things that I'd highlight. One is that the recommendation is that we're committing to keep a cash reserve balance split between general stabilization and free cash. That's very important from a liquidity standpoint. That's what the rating agencies look for. But, Robin, as you mentioned, 8% is on the low end.
Right.
But that's an important piece that, we're committing to keeping reserves and liquidity available. That's very important. Right. And the other piece is that, we've identified what our major liabilities are. The town has done a great job in fully funding its town OPEB liability, which is fantastic and was very proactive. Now you're tackling the other largest liability that you have out there, which is the regional school liability. So, these kind of smart and strategic appropriations overall help ensure the financial solvency of the town so that you're preventing surprises or issues in the future.
Right. And, a part of me, I'm only one vote in this whole thing. I think targeting 8% isn't where I would feel really comfortable with if these were just my finances. I would like to see us move up towards, the 15%, because you never know. You never know. And that's why, to your point, we need to keep watching this, over time. And these are just projections, and see where our projections come in. I do think it's really important to change that term of excess free cash, because I think when people see that, they're going to suggest that we return it to them. So I think maybe it should be unallocated free cash, or why not put it into free cash? You know, the range is between 8 and 15%. And when you look at the very fiscally healthy towns in the Commonwealth, they're closer to the 15% than the 8. So.
Yeah, I can definitely change the
I just
convention.
The other thing, which is just personal preference, red to me is bad. It means the cash is draining out.
In the
So I
deficit,
would use
yeah.
green because that means it's coming in. But
Okay.
yeah, just a personal choice there.
Right. Okay.
No, this is, I think it's a really complicated subject. I think this really crystallizes the important points that need to get made and are being made. I think everybody should commend themselves on getting to where we are today, because it is complicated, and I think we can only improve going forward.
Then just a couple of things just to build off of that, Robin, that I'd highlight on the next slide.
Right, and I think this is important. These are my personal observations.
Robin, did you have a lot of coffee at lunch today?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Robin's world. This is.
I know you're excited. Like when you see spreadsheets, you get really, really excited. Really excited.
That's what I do.
Chris, go ahead.
And Chris is used to it. He's had passionate conversations with me about these things a lot. And Dave Sullivan can say the same thing.
So you got to remember that the chart is supposed to present sort of the overall picture of what we're trying to achieve, and we tried to show what the cash reserve balances would be. So that, because that was the discussion, right? The point was we're going to have a cash reserve made up of 2 components, blah, blah, blah. And this is just meant to represent that. I thought you were going to ask how come the 2.6 from the 6.6 doesn't come to 5, or 4 rather, and on the first column. And so, this is not meant to be an accounting spreadsheet. It's meant to be illustrative of what the
yeah, but people are going to add numbers up.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you get to a point where you've really simplified it. People just add numbers together. So
I always thought that was just an accounting thing. Anybody with an accounting degree, you always add the numbers to see if they work. But in any event, the issue there is the free unrestricted cash is in the excess free cash, and I don't really like the excess free cash line either, and so unrestricted would cover it pretty well.
Great, thanks, Bob. Well, I guess I'll just I'll leave that. I guess that's it. We've got some of the highlights that we've already talked about the policy and its flexibility and the phased approach, so that we're not doing too much at once. That there's opportunity for consistent and regular review to make sure that it aligns with our priorities. And I'd take any questions. I also just before that I am seeking a vote by the board this evening, if you would so choose. I think it's helpful having a vote by the Board of Selectmen going into town meeting as it relates to these financial policies. And I understand that the warrant committee took a vote on them last night, and Rob's here, and I'm sure we'll speak to it at the next agenda item.
Okay. Before we discuss this and move to the summary and to the recommendation, Rob, is there anything that you would like to add at this point with regards to Chris's presentation that we've just seen?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm happy to. I was planning on sharing our thoughts next, but if it's helpful for you to hear the warrant committee's thoughts on the proposal, I'm happy to share them now.
that would be great. I would like to hear them. Well, he offered. It's part of a conversation, so.
Thank you, Robin. That's exactly what I was going to say. Robin,
I'll take that as being recognized to speak. So I will speak.
thank you, Rob.
We last night, and not just last night, but Chris had asked us to take a vote on this to see if our whole body would endorse this proposal. And as we've been talking about it over the last few months, there have been a lot of, as you can imagine, with our group, there was a lot of discussion about this proposal. In the end, we unanimously voted to approve an endorsement of this, recognizing what Robin has just said, in that it doesn't commit us to a numbers every for the future. Each year at town meeting, the town has to vote on this, and the warrant committee will recommend specific numbers to fill in those different slots. So although that spreadsheet is nice, that doesn't mean that's what the reality would be. But we feel very strongly that the town needs a framework to work with. It needs goalposts. It needs a path. It needs to be transparent. Instead of having a large pot of money in free cash that everyone thinks is theirs to use, this provides very smart communication to the town as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it is incredibly prudent in thinking about our liabilities, both capital and OPEB, et cetera. So although some of our members, like Robin, would want to see a higher level of reserve, and some members, to be honest, would rather see much lower, we felt that this was a great compromise and a wonderful framework to move forward with, and we appreciate the work that both committees did. And yeah, so that was in the end, it was a unanimous vote to endorse the proposal. We hope that the Board of Selectmen will join us in that endorsement so that we can move forward together with the same framework and goalposts. So we're not having the same conversations we've been having for years and years about different things. If we're all speaking the same language or singing in the same chorus, it's much easier. We can argue about which note we want to be on, but singing the same song is better than trying to sing different songs. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Well said. Bob?
Hey, Chris, the highlights slide with the 4 points, to me, that's the most powerful slide because it says we're taking a very methodical approach. We have checkpoints every year. It's a management tool, no addition. I mean, you might want to think about moving that around because it's really key. I mean, the thought processes, we had good conversations. It was really good fun to work on these things. But it's, it is something that is a work in progress. Like I said, the chart is illustrative. It's not meant to be a projection. And the whole idea of phased, flexible checkpoints as a tool to improve the town, that's all really important stuff. And I hope that gets, by the time you get to the 5th or 6th, most people's eyes glaze over. You just may want to think about maybe putting those things up front as a way to sort of frame this thing. But everybody sort of said the same thing, and I think it's important that you get that out. Thank you, Joe.
Rob?
Just a point of clarification for Chris. Were you planning on presenting this at town meeting as a particular warrant article? Because that doesn't make sense to me. I feel like this is a different, maybe, you use the points to, if there's questions on the floor, but I don't know if you want to open town meeting up to a discussion about something that there's no vote on. So when you're talking about the presentation, I just want to be clear that that's a presentation on the website or this PowerPoint to be shopped around to different boards so that everyone's on the same page, but not at town meeting, where I don't know that there's a particular spot for that directly, unless I'm missing something that someone hasn't told me about town meeting.
Yeah, no, that's a good observation, Rob. I haven't had an opportunity to speak with the board yet about presentations, nor with Jim, the moderator, yet. As it relates to presentations, there are components that
Of
will
course.
of this that will come up, like the general stabilization fund and the OPEB. But from where I was thinking was that this becomes a resource online for people to be able to read in advance of town meeting. And I wasn't necessarily thinking of a presentation the day of. But again, I haven't had an opportunity to speak with the board or Jim about that at this point.
I like your thoughts, Chris. Thank you.
And Chris-
Rob, this is
Chris,
a good
it's also-
spot that to have this type of material and this type of presentation in reserve at the ready, because at town meeting, typically what happens is there's a discussion and there can be a motion from the floor with regards to the stabilization, right? So this is a good thing to have. It's a good thing that to have had the availability for people to view, to see, to understand, and to know that this is the document they will see if there is a motion from the floor. So, as Chris said it in his introduction to this, Robin, Bob, we've all chaired this conversation. We've all presented this strategy in one form of another as it pertained to a specific warrant article in the past 6 years. So this is a continuing theme, and as I think we're all, as you use the metaphor from the song standpoint, this is a song that we've all been singing. We are trying to get it to harmonize.
So
Robin?
my point was, John, that if there's questions, right? If there's a question that comes up and you wanted to respond to it, the strong points are the goals and the highlights here. That those are the things. I mean, you're not going to go through the numbers. Those are the things that I think sell the argument and convince people that it's a thoughtful, methodical process. That's all. It's just I'd say being prepared.
Yep. Being prepared, and we will get discussion. Jim and Dave have to be prepared with regards to discussions and potential motions or amendments, and this is all going to be very helpful. Robin, you were about to say something.
I think.
Oh no, stay just like that. Stay just like that. That's perfect. No. Go back. That was perfect.
Yeah, so you're a funny guy, John. What I think would be helpful, because we do have those 2 stabilization funds, warrant articles. So some, you could, at the beginning of those, there are probably 4 or 5 bullet points that are already in the presentation that you just remind people. It's the same thing with the water bylaw. This is just one more thing that we're doing or continuing to do in connection with the long range strategy. So.
Yeah, well said. Dave Haviland, Jim, do you have anything you'd like to add just to this before we offer a motion?
No, I don't. I think that it's in good hands, and I think maybe when we get a little bit closer to town meeting, Chris and Dave and I can meet to discuss some what he should include in a presentation and what we should have for contingency plans. But I think right now we're in good position, and we'll just wait another couple of weeks to see if anything percolates, and then we'll try to have a game plan, a strategy in place.
Thanks, Jim. That sounds good. Dave, anything?
I just quickly want to second Robin's comments on the labeling of it, and others did as well. I think that's going to be extremely important when if town meeting sees this slide. It's going to be extremely important that it's presented the way that everyone intends it to be, and not have one little word derail the whole thing.
Thank you. Bob, Robin, anything else to add before we make a motion?
No.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you. I move to endorse the reserve policy recommendations as presented and ask for a second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye, John Jeffries.
Aye, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springer.
Thank you all very much. Chris, well done. We're gonna, and thanks everyone for the comments. It's really, really, really helpful, and it adds a lot of context and color to this, which we greatly appreciate it. And as we've all said, this has been a work in progress for a very long time. So, well done to all the people who've put time and effort into this. So our next item for this evening is a warrant committee recommendations on the town meeting articles. The warrant committee chair, Rob Andrews, who you just heard from, is going to be the presenter. And Rob, the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks. Chris, did you have one more thing? I saw your hand raised.
I was just, John, I sent you a message. I'm hoping that 1.6, agenda item 1.6, the Municipal Vulnerability Program grant application and potential vote could be moved up. It can be moved up after the warrant committee recommendations, but this item will impact the warrant, and just in terms of the sequential order of things, it would make sense to address this and get the board's perspective on it before you make your recommendations on the article. So either, Rob can go ahead and then we can address this, but I'm hoping that at least we can address 1.6 before the board makes their recommendations on the warrant articles.
Rob, are you okay? Do you,
you can actually, I think it would be, because whatever you decide on 1.6 will determine if we have to re-vote on something or not. So it would be, I'm happy to have you do it right now, actually.
Okay.
That's okay.
Thanks. I just wanted to check in and make sure kid time, and if you're not on tuck-in duty tonight,
you're gonna hear it when I speak regardless, so it's all good.
let's do it quickly. Let's do it quickly. So Chris, the floor is yours for 1.6.
Thank you, John, and I appreciate the accommodation. This is a last-minute request, given the fact that the state has recently offered and has just opened up a grant funding round for what they call the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Action Grant. This is a grant funding opportunity that's available to MVP communities, which we are an MVP community. Remember, a few years ago, we went through the exercise of a community-based discussion around our most vulnerable infrastructure. And to that end, this grant program has become one of the premier grant programs in the state for communities to fund their infrastructure needs, especially those needs that are related to the impacts of climate change or are in vulnerable areas. The grant program provides awards of up to $4 million to fund both the design and construction of certain infrastructure projects. So as the board knows, we've got Claybrook Road, which is being eaten away by the Charles River, is an area of great importance to us in order to address. And the Center Street Central Ave Bridge, which we share with Needham, is an area of concern as well. Just a few weeks ago, the Needham side of the guardrail had a hole poked in it from a car almost going into the river. So these are two areas of infrastructure that have been addressed as priorities in the community. And there's two things that I'm asking for the board to vote on tonight. The first is to allow me and the team to submit a grant application to pay for design funds for the work needed at Claybrook Road and for the work needed at the Central Ave, or the Center Street, bridge. Part of the grant, the second piece is to ask for the matching requirement that is part of the grant application. The grant application asks for a commitment of a 25% match that can be cash or in-kind donation via staff time. We're presently pegging the bridge project to be a $2 million design effort. I've been in touch with Needham about splitting that cost, which they support and are okay with. And so that's why I'm asking for that appropriation. It makes us more competitive in the grant application, and it allows us to move forward should we be awarded the grant. If we do move forward and appropriate this money at town meeting and we are unsuccessful with this particular grant fund, there are a whole host of other grant opportunities that the state and federal government offer that oftentimes require a match. And so having this money available to us to meet that match just better positions us to be able to act swiftly on getting these two pieces of infrastructure repaired. Time is certainly of the essence, especially as federal stimulus dollars are coming down to the states for these particular infrastructure areas. So we want to make sure that we're best aligned and best positioned to be able to move these projects forward. So my request again is to allow staff to move forward with a grant application for these two projects. And the second is to recommend to town meeting that we appropriate $250,000 of free cash for capital infrastructure needs as part of Article 15. And that article is the article that appropriates free cash or other available funds for one-time projects.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Before we get to the motion conversation, Rob and Bob, I just want you to know that Chris and I took part in a meeting last week with Denise Garlick's office and with our United States Congress, the congressman and his office, with regards to options and opportunities that we will have for these two projects, in addition to the Willow Street Bridge Dam project. So we are looking at these things in a number of different ways. This is a sequential and strategic approach, as Chris mentioned, to our infrastructure priorities that we, together with Denise, together, as Chris mentioned, with Needham, have been looking at not only as the town, but as a district and as in conjunction with our neighbors in Needham. So, Robin, questions or comments for Chris?
I do have some questions. So Chris, first I'm making the assumption that both Dover and Needham will apply for a grant. Is that a correct assumption?
So there's only one lead applicant.
Okay.
Dover, we've agreed to do that since Needham has paid for the engineering analysis and the current monitoring that's on the bridge. But they support the project and will sign on as a co-sponsor for the grant application when we submit.
Okay, so that was a bad assumption on my part. Checkbox number one. And then, so the $250,000 of funds, so is that what we're applying for in this grant, is just funds for the engineering work to be done? Or was I not paying attention? Because that's our matching piece, right? So does that mean we'll just apply for a grant for $250,000? It's not the grant to actually rebuild the bridge, or is it?
Nope. So right now would be in the design phase. We need design work done for what the new bridge would look like.
Okay.
Beta engineers who Needham contracted with a few years ago to do feasibility study and existing monitoring have estimated the design costs to be $2 million. That is the grant amount that we're applying for, $2 million.
Okay.
If 25% of that, split between the two towns, is the $200,000. The additional $50,000 would be our 25% match if we were to be awarded the design funds for Claybrook Road.
Okay.
And that's what makes up that $250,000.
Clearly I wasn't paying attention. All right, thank you.
Rob and I are both shaking our head at the same time.
I got a little confused there.
So, Bob?
So I thought Robin's questions were pretty good, but this seems to be more like an ante. You have to ante up in order to be into the pot and take
Right,
advantage.
but you're not spending 100%, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
They want us to have skin in the game. Nothing wrong with that.
So when I reviewed this stuff this afternoon, it looked like a pretty darn good proposition.
Yes, it is. Chris, anything else?
No, that's it for me, John. Thanks. Just a motion, if you would.
Sure. So I move to authorize the town administrator to apply for grant funding through the MVP Action Grant Program for the Center Street Bridge and the Claybrook Road. And further, I recommend the requesting of $250,000 to be appropriated for the capital infrastructure needs as part of the annual town meeting warrant, Article 15, appropriate for one-time projects, and ask for a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor? I, John Jeffries.
I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springer.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you all. So we're going to go back and we're going to ask Rob.
Yep. You ready?
Ready.
All right. I will just ask questions along the way if you have more, but I'll try to be as brief as I can. So we met 2 weeks ago to kind of go over and vote and deliberate. And for many of the warrant articles, there was unanimous decisions to recommend. And then there were a number of articles where we had very robust discussions, and I will try to illuminate those discussions for the Board of Selectmen tonight. So the first piece of the warrant, most of the financial piece is capital, as we had gotten it, the operating budget. We voted unanimously to move forward with those and recommend them all. This is a personal note because I've been the liaison to the school committee for a number of years now, and I am pretty impressed that the past few years they've been completely flat. And I know that talking with other towns, that's not the case. So it's pretty awesome that our schools are being as fiscally responsible and still providing amazing service to our town. So that's just a personal note. So again, we voted all the way up to Article 15, which we voted last night, which we also voted to approve. And I wanted to, I've been bugging Chris probably too much for him about talking with state and our federal representatives about grant money for our infrastructure. So it was very nice to see that, even though it was last minute, but we voted for that as well. With the planning board articles, this is where I do have one recommendation for the Board of Selectmen. I've already spoken to Carol Lisbon about it and Jim Ripetti. I asked that the Board of Selectmen change the articles in order to do Article 22nd before Article 21. Article 22 is an update of definitions, and Article 21 uses definitions in understanding what they're updating. And so it's weird to have a conversation about something that you then vote on later to define. So the order didn't make sense. And Carol agreed with me, and I know she's listening, so if she doesn't agree with me anymore, she can speak. I give her permission to interrupt me. And I spoke to Jim about it, and he understood too. So that's one recommendation that the warrant committee would like to make. For all the planning board articles, with the exception of one person who voted no on the accessory apartments, all the rest were unanimously voted to recommend. So all of them will be, in the blue book at least, will be voting to recommend. When we move to Article 24, what was the vote on that one? That was the wetlands protection bylaws. There was a pretty robust discussion, so I anticipate there being one at town meeting of increasing the buffer zone from 100 to 150. In the end, we voted 7-2 in favor of recommending the proposed changes. There's particular concern of the dissenters regarding just change in people's personal ability to do things on their law and having to deal with the townhouse for that. The second bylaw change didn't have any pushback, and that's the change of the fee structure of not having a maximum fee. That didn't seem to have discussion. Article 25 was also a rather contentious conversation. In the end, it went for a 6-3 vote in favor of recommending, but I would also anticipate a robust conversation about this one. The folks that were in the kind of minority opinion felt that it was this, and I was not in this, so you'll have to read the details for their real argument, but this is my understanding of their argument, is that, basically if you live on an estate where you have your house's and irrigation system is in a setback, no one's going to fine you because they're not going to know that you're using the irrigation system. But if you happen to have a house right up against the road and a neighbor who is really into this, you're going to get fined, and that's unfair and it will be arbitrary. Plus there was a discussion about it was a blanket statement for everyone, and not everyone. Some folks are on Natick water and have to kind of go with what Natick says. So there's kind of a confusion as to, like, if Dover says something but Natick doesn't, what do those folks do? So those were their main objections. And then one person really focused on the not encouraging neighborly kind of conversations around this, where people are going to be trying to get their neighbors fined for using irrigation system. The majority opinion, however, feels really strongly that waters are one of our most important resources, and that this was really a great first step in, or really not really the first step, but maybe the third or fourth step on what the town has been doing to really address the issue of water conservation in our town. So the majority in the end recommended to do that, but I do anticipate a discussion about that. We assume Article 26 is still being withdrawn. Article 27, and I was hoping that I encouraged the students to come tonight. We could not reach consensus on this. It was a 4-4-1 abstention vote, so we had no recommendation, but we didn't not recommend it or recommend it. And I've encouraged, I think that the students will probably watch your deliberations on this one and make a decision whether or not to move forward based on kind of where you guys land on this. The folks that were in the wanting to recommend this recognizes that there's no obligation from the town. It's just to recommend things and to just highlight the fact that we are in a climate crisis, and that climate change exists and it's impacting all that we do, and that we feel that it is important for the town to make a public statement about that. The folks that didn't support this article felt that it's just an inappropriate thing to have at town meeting, that this is something to be addressed through Board of Selectmen's office or through other boards, and that at town meeting, to have a town meeting to vote on something that doesn't have any financial impact, it's just a feel-good thing, and that it would set precedents for future kind of statements at town meeting to be made. And that, but this was one of the more lengthy conversations, and so I anticipate that if this moves forward, and we do this at the beginning of town meeting, this could take a lot of time, I think. But they haven't withdrawn from what I understand, but I did speak to them about that being a possibility, given that the warrant committee did not reach a recommendation either way. Article 28, this was also a robust conversation where in the end it was a 7-2 vote in favor of recommending. The conversation for the two that did not recommend it was that they supported the idea of a 5-person Board of Selectmen, and that they were done with that they thought that the presenter had enough research to prove that we could just move to vote for it at town meeting, and that we don't need another consultant being hired by the townhouse to just prolong the process. But those in the majority felt that a third party do so, to make recommendations would be good, and that if the Board of Selectmen appoint a committee, the committee doesn't have to use the $7,500 to appoint a consultant. They could just come up with their own recommendations and move that forward. So it's not required. So that ended up being recommended by that was 7-2 to 0. And then Article 29 to install sidewalks was not. Oh, Jim, you had a question? Go ahead. You're on mute.
No, I have a question after you're done, Rob.
Okay.
I didn't
No worries.
interrupt. Sorry.
No worries. And then Article 29, it failed to be recommended. I've let the citizen know that the warrant committee is not recommending sidewalks. I would ask that members of the townhouse or the Board of Selectmen also help communicate with the citizen on this particular issue. It is unclear to me if the citizen understands what they need to do to keep moving forward. And I, even after a few emails and phone calls, so the warrant committee would ask some support on this particular issue, or I am not sure how this will go at town meeting. I'll leave it at that and happy to talk offline about that. And then Article 30 passed unanimously 9-0 with the 1.6 as per the recommendations of the reserve policy. So that is kind of in summary where we landed and why we landed. And then the change about the planning board order.
Got it. So, Jim, do you want to ask your question now, Jim Repetti?
Yeah, let me preface my remarks by saying that I'm an avid outdoors person. I think climate change is real, but I'm worried about trying to keep the town meeting as short as possible. And some of you know, we had a high school play a week or so ago, and I know 3 people who came down with COVID, probably attributable to that gathering. This is ultimately going to be a call for the Board of Health in terms of how we proceed, but I'm in favor of trying to keep things as short as possible for this meeting. So I would prefer that either they postpone this for a future town meeting, or alternatively ask the Board of Selectmen to take action on it in lieu of the town meeting. And again, it's because I'm balancing the health of the attendees at a town meeting that we're planning on having indoors, trying to keep it as short as possible, versus an important policy question that is in many ways way beyond the scope of town meeting. So in normal times, I think I would be perfectly happy to accommodate everybody. But given what we're dealing with in COVID, given what happened a week ago with, I know 3 people personally who have now tested positive for COVID, and they think it was because of attending the high school play. I would like to postpone this to a future town meeting, or alternatively have the Board of Selectmen act on it. And I'm sorry to have to present this in this manner, but I'm worried. I am worried about the health of our citizens, and I want to make sure we get a quorum. I want to make sure that we can get people in and out of there as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. On this particular matter, just what Jim voiced, Robin, Bob, comments, just specifically comments, questions for Jim, procedurally, strategically, with regards to this topic before we get to the next items.
With regards to the specific warrant article?
No, with regards to this warrant article and specifically Jim Repetti's comments just now.
Regarding town meeting?
Yes.
I think we've always known it's a fluid, it's fluid. So, I think you just have to wait and see what happens.
With respect to this article, though, Robin, the article on climate change, the student article.
just like Jim, I completely, I think we should not bury our head in the sand anymore. We should do things we should be beginning to think about climate change. Everything we're doing with water is related to that. And, I never really thought of it. It is a policy change. So maybe this is something that, maybe we set up some kind of a task force and we have these students participate in it.
Bob?
I
really haven't given it a lot of thought.
I'm sort of caught up in the issue of, is this appropriate for town meeting? There's been any number of resolutions that have been passed in the 60s, and it really hasn't gotten us anywhere. I'm really much more interested in actions, and I think that the town's actions on climate change has been pretty progressive all along. I think there's been a great deal of interest and intent in making sure that what we're doing is climate appropriate. So I'm sort of more inclined to take it offline. A, because I'm not sure it fits in with the purpose of town meeting. And B, I think that we do want to get through the town meeting as quickly as possible, and see if we can handle it from the Board of Selectmen in a different way, recognizing the importance. I mean, that might make the most sense.
Okay. How about this? And let's just leave the discussion for this particular item at this point, and we can have discussions about it offline, because I don't want to belabor this. I want to get to some of the meat of a few things that Rob has brought to our attention, the sequence of these. How about this? I have a day scheduled it's either next week or the week after, with my visits to Mr. O'Hagan and Tom Bork's civics class. The folks who brought this are sophomores. I'm going to be meeting with sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And what we may, a compromise or a solution, better words, probably a solution for this could be to ask them if the selectmen, the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Selectmen's office, issued a statement, made a recommendation, made a proclamation, something along those lines, in lieu of this as a warrant article at town meeting. I think that may be something that can be very constructive and maybe helpful. And I think at the end of the day, that if we can demonstrate to the people who have brought this article, the warrant article, to us, who've put the time, energy, and effort, that we recognize and understand what they're trying to do, and in the interest of, as Jim Petty said, the interest of safety, simply put, that it's probably best for at this time that this not be the forum, and maybe a alternative forum be a better solution. Would anybody have an objection to that?
I'd be good with that, John.
Okay, Robin, would you be good with that?
Yep.
Okay, so let's, Chris, let's you and I meet tomorrow. Or it doesn't have to be tomorrow, depending upon your day. We can meet next week, but I'll talk to Mr. O'Hagan and Mr. Bork, figure out what my day is. I'll get their input, and I think that, Jim, I think that might be a good solution for this. You okay with that?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. And again, I just want to stress, as you pointed out, John, it's really a concern about trying to minimize the amount of time that we spend in the auditorium.
Yeah.
The sooner that we get out of there, the safer everybody's going to be.
Rob?
Yeah, just so you know, John, Dawn Fattori is the kind of faculty sponsor of the group, so you should touch base with her. She's very she's in communication with the students that are involved in this, very much so. I would also just so you know, I've made it very clear that to the students that the Board of Selectmen in the town of Dover has been out front on issues of climate. So even if they aren't speaking, like making a proclamation, that the town is not, that the actions speak very loud, and that although it is a crisis, that even articles that we're debating at town meeting this year are related to that. And so the students are aware of that. But I just want to let you know that foundation has hopefully been set for your conversation.
Thank you. That's well said and appreciated. So thank you for that. So Rob, let's get back to the structure and a couple of the comments. We do not have, as a general comment to Robin and Bob, we don't have to go through each warrant article. We, the Board of Selectmen, don't have to give our approval for each warrant article. What I'd like to do is to ask both of you, do you have specific articles that you would like to have a discussion this evening on? And what are they? What's the particular order? And so let's try to specifically address the ones, if you feel there's a need to address a couple of these this evening, that we can do in a methodical, very high level manner, so we can get to the ones that we think may be problematic. So Robin, any of these, and the answer may be none of them, but Robin, which or any of these would you like to discuss this evening?
I feel as though we've discussed these over and over and over again. I don't know what you envision as a discussion here. Clearly, I think, we know which ones are going to be controversial.
Yep.
I don't believe we've ever voted on any. Maybe I'm wrong.
No.
Chris, you're raising your hand?
Yeah. Just quickly, if I might. So last year, as we were incorporating new pre-town meeting practices into the deliberations and the lead up to town meeting, there were two new things that we did. The first was to invite warrant committee to come and share before the select board, a summary of their recommendations, and Rob is here doing that for us this year. The second thing that we did was provide an opportunity for the board to provide their recommendations leading up to town meeting as well, so that residents or community members could get a sense of where the Board of Selectmen stood on items, as well as where the warrant committee stood on items, looking for a recommendation from from the town's leadership. So this would be the second year that we did that. I've stuck with, the tradition now that has been in place for 1 year. If the board would prefer not to do that, that's totally fine. But I've structured it so that you could make recommendations on all the articles. You could make no recommendation. You could defer to the petitioner if you'd like. But my hope was that the warrant article list summary that is included in your packet, that has the warrant committee's recommendations listed out, would also have the Board of Selectmen's recommendations listed out, should you decide that you want to make recommendations. And this summary document would also go on the town's town meeting website as another piece of information for residents as we head into town meeting. So they'd have the blue book, they'd have the summary of recommendations, and then they'd have all the article presentations as a suite of materials going into town meeting. So I'd structured it as you'd be making recommendations, but if the board would prefer not to.
I just think it's 8:06. So if we're going to go through each of these, that's a robust conversation. So
No.
I don't know. I certainly can tell you right now that I am in favor of all of these warrant articles, with the exception of, from what I heard, I did not think that there was enough justification for the Main Street and Dover Road sidewalk. The presentation that was made just had a lot of holes in it, and I would have a hard time recommending that. The climate change I was in favor of but you all have given me pause to think about this a little bit more. And tonight I've asked myself, is this really a policy item, and should this be addressed at town meeting, or should we be addressing it in a different venue? It might be fun to do a joint task force of sorts with the school, and understand how it could be a fun extracurricular activity that maybe ultimately becomes a recommendation to next year's town meeting with action items on things that the town could do. And these things are coming off the top of my head, so I don't even know if they make any sense.
Hey, you're doing fine. You're doing fine.
Right. So, those are the only, those really are the only two that give me pause for concern.
Bob?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much like Robin. I would certainly support all the ones that have been recommended by warrant. I would not support the request for sidewalks. I echo Robin's comments. I have the only other thing that I'll take the time right now to talk about. I think we've all heard some concerns about the water use restriction bylaw, particularly the enforcement side. I don't know if something, my question is, if something comes up asking about enforcement, who responds to that kind of question? Jim, is that something you direct to the Board of Selectmen or the Warrant Committee? How will that work?
I thought it would we basically, in the presentation, I think it's the DPW that's going to be, in charge of this.
Yes.
But it's people immediately jump to the punitive side of this.
Yep.
And this is just another step, another tool in the toolbox that we have that can allow us to take action if necessary when we have severe droughts like we did in 2018 and 2020. And you talk to other towns that have these bylaws in place, and it's ultimately, it's not fair to balance the town's water resource problem on customers of Colonial Water only. Because it's just another tool, and it's somewhat, I hate to be like this, and maybe I'm just grumpy from travel, but it's somewhat childish to immediately focus on my neighbor's going to turn me in. We should all be concerned about our utilization of water. The only thing we can do is reduce consumption. So, this is just going to make you more aware of, where you are. Like, you drive through Medfield, it says level 1, level 2, level 3 all summer. And these are the kinds of things that we're going to be seeing. And for me, when I see level 3, I come home and I say, I'm just going to take the hose and water my flowers. There's no need to water anything else.
So the concern was that we've recently come across some, let's say, unpleasantness in the town. There's been some tension on certain things. And the individual who was speaking about this said he doesn't want to see another instance where you're sort of pitting neighbor against neighbor and creating disharmony. So the issue isn't about conserving water, it's how it's enforced and avoiding sort of having neighbor sort of tell on neighbor. So to me, it's just a question that if this comes up and there's questions, we should be prepared with appropriate answers. It's directed to preventing
Well,
some of
I think the town, you saw Chris's budget. There isn't a revenue line item for water restriction enforcement that's increasing our revenue. So, again, it's just a tool. And
Bob, and this is an emotional issue. It's an emotional
I know, but
issue.
Bob, I'm just saying it's just a tool. If you want to vote against it because you think it's going to pit neighbor against, not you personally, but if individuals, because they don't want to pit neighbor against neighbor, that's their choice.
Yes.
Now, I don't think, maybe I live in a bubble, but I just don't see that happening.
So, all good discussion, all valid points, and the only thing that I would add in the same context of this discussion is time. What we're really talking about is the conversation that's going to happen at town meeting. So to boil it down to the least common denominator for tonight, I think our concerns about Article 29, Robin, Bob, I agree with you both. I'd also add Article 28 into that. As Rob mentioned, these are the articles that his committee was split upon. I think Article 28 is doing the same thing, a similar type of thing, where I don't think Article 28 is the right town meeting is the right place for it. And here's why. There were 28 slides there were 29 slides that the presenter had for Article 28.
Well, he's not going to have that much time to present. It
He
was
knows-
a very ineffective presentation, and if he wants to make a more effective presentation, he needs to reduce the slides.
He knows and is working on that. He knows. He knows.
So, Rob, I also think that in the slide presentation and in any form of debate that's going to come as a result, the body, the town meeting, is going to say to the presenter, half the towns that you are illustrating have a 3-person board of selectmen, the other half have a 5-person. By your own slides, it's split. So that just mathematically and logically is going to tell me that you are going to have lots of debate, and by definition of math, the room is going to be split. What that will do is create lots and lots of time and debate.
But the individual,
That's not what
it's not what the Warren article is about.
Correct.
He's not looking to increase it. All he wants to do is for the town to
I understand that.
John, it's freedom of speech. Everybody is entitled. This is what makes town meeting great or frustrating. If this is something you're passionate about, but the individual needs to make a more effective presentation because it got lost in the 28 slides, and it sounds like he knows that already, right?
We're not debating that. That's not the point. The point of this evening is, as Jim Repetti, Rob, what we're going back to is time. We're talking about time. And
well, there are limits on his presentation, right, Jim? There are limits on the right.
Yeah.
That's right. He's going to all persons who are proposing articles are limited to 8 minutes in their presentation.
Yeah, and debate from the floor.
As an organized opposition, they would have 8 minutes. Comments from the floor by citizens are limited to 2 minutes.
Dave Haviland, you are.
As his little timer.
Rob and Dave.
Ding. Time's up. But 2 time, I mean.
My interest here is.
Bob, hang on 1 second. Dave wants to make a point.
Sorry.
No worries. And thank you. So what bothers or concerns me, bothers a wrong word, but what concerns me is all 3 of these articles are going to be, extremely difficult for Jim to keep a lid on.
Agreed.
These, I mean, the comments coming from the floor could go any which way at any point in time. Trying to keep order and keep civility of the town meeting is my concern. And in echoing, I don't want to repeat what everyone else has already said, but that's my concern, is that these could spin for 45 minutes and an hour and come up with just gnashing of teeth.
Each of these. Each of these.
So, trying to get through where I've personally resigned to, we're going two nights no matter what. But what I'm worried about is two very long back-to-back meetings with a lot of animosity. And these three articles have the ability to do that. So I don't know, Jim, are you comfortable in being able to, I mean, I know you're going to say yes, control the floor, but is it something that concerns you or not?
No, I appreciate your concern, Dave, but I'm not really worried about that. I think that you and I we've been doing this for 12 years now, and we went through the rail trail and many other contentious meetings and contentious articles. So I think we do have the ability to control it. And I think people, by and large, we're lucky we have a citizenry that is able to control their emotions and make rational points. And if people aren't able to do that, we'll gently remind them that that's what they should be doing. And at the end of the day, I hold the gavel. Which also can be used as a weapon. So,
I just have said my point that I think these, like with the planning board, those two could be contentious, but they're defined. And
Yes.
people know that they're defined. These seem much more undefined, and that's my concern. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thanks, Dave. I agree wholeheartedly with you. I think that these have the ability to be very long from a time standpoint, lots of contention. So what I am trying to do, and Robin, your comment is not lost, and the comment has to be the same for all of these parties. We're making a decision for the sidewalk petition. We're trying to find an alternative for the students, and likewise, I'd like to find an alternative to this. I just think this article is being addressed by the modernization process that's been underway for the past 7 years. That
clearly an effective argument to that point has not been made, because if one was made, then this wouldn't be a Warren article.
But Robin,
I just think the sponsor needs, and it sounds like the sponsor is very aware that he needs to cut down his presentation and focus on what he's really trying to do. So,
Jim?
Yeah, I think that we may be comparing apples to oranges here. I think that one of the articles, the one that deals with climate change, is one that we could spend a significant amount of time debating whether it really should be within the scope of a town meeting deliberation. Given the amount of work that the town has done to deal with climate issues and conservation issues, and given the fact that the town is managed by the Board of Selectmen, you can make a pretty strong argument that this is really something that's within the purview of the Board of Selectmen. On the other hand, the composition of the Board of Selectmen, the size of the Board of Selectmen, I view as essentially a question for the citizenry to decide. And the fact that it might be debated, I worry about the time because of safety. And I'm going to be talking to the Board of Health about this as we progress. As Robin mentioned, we knew that this was going to be a fluid situation with COVID. But everything is a balancing test, the pros against the cons. And when you're dealing with a climate control issue where it's so far on the fringe of what a town meeting normally deals with in terms of the town business, you can make a strong argument that the balance for health outweighs the balance or the factors that are in favor of town governance. On the other hand, this Board of Selectmen goes to the essence of town governance. It's the most important board. And I think that I can control the debate. At least so far, we've been pretty successful, all of us, in making sure that people stay on time and that they're civil. So I wouldn't think about this so much as a question about controlling the debate as I would, one is the health concern. That is something that you all will have to take into account, and with respect to the meeting as a whole. But secondly, thinking about what disagreement is the essence of town meeting.
That's what makes it fun, right? That's a sport.
Yeah,
of it.
exactly. I mean, that's the beauty of democracy. If we all agreed, hell, it'd be awfully boring.
Right, and you have to let people, we always say, if you want something, let the voters decide. So let the voter, if you decide not to go to town meeting, it's not important enough for you,
So Rob, I'm going to jump in because I don't think he's asking us to vote 5-3. He's asking us to take it under consideration. And I think that the answer for us is, we have as I think you said earlier, in our plans for next year, we're going to take a look at the government. We're going to start the process. This will be one of the things that we consider. I don't think this is going to be a debate at all. I think this is going to be, he makes the presentation. We say, thank you very much. We're going to take this under consideration. We're going to put it as part of our ongoing modernization of it when we take a look at town meetings. Rob, is that right or wrong?
No, so it's an actual vote that you would actually appoint a task force to address this particular issue, and that task force would have a budget of $7,500 to use what they need to use to make a presentation, so that next year at town meeting, if they wanted to expand the board, they could bring that to the table. So my suggestion is, if you don't want to have this at town meeting, appoint the task force now. So if you want, you could just appoint the task force now, and I think he would say, great, you're starting the modernization effort now. But you could do whatever you want. But that's just my 10 cents on if you don't want to put it to the discussion of the town, then because I think he's going to proceed regardless. Like I don't think you're going to get this to be withdrawn by the citizen.
No. We don't want that.
Right.
Why would we want a separate effort if we're going to take a look at the government? Why would we do this piecemeal? That's sort of, it seems to me it's just an extra thing. Where if we're going to take a look at, should we have X, Y, or Z, why wouldn't this be baked into the overall town's initiative rather than as a separate standalone initiative?
Here's my point. You go through the process, you have a lengthy debate, the debate fails, right? The citizens say no. Next year, as a part of what we're doing, we're going to look at this as an option, as Bob just described. So really, what have we accomplished?
Well, it's freedom of speech. This individual has the right to come to town meeting and sponsor an article. So the rebuttal, you could stand up and we could say, this is already being addressed. It's another data point as part of the modernization effort, and then people will vote yes or no to appropriate the funds.
I'm not disagreeing with that, Robin. What I'm saying is we are...
But it's not for us to decide, John. Everybody... No, it isn't. Anybody, any citizen at town meeting can sponsor an article. That's right. And there'll be debate, and some people may agree and some people won't agree. But it's the sponsor's right to make his point.
What would you want Jim Rapetti and Dave Haviland to do if there was a motion from the floor to address climate change after we this evening have just discussed, let's go back to the kids and to Don Fattori and to the civics class and see if we can do it at
That's different.
Why is it different?
Because this is an action, John. This individual is sponsoring. This individual is saying, I want $7,500, And I want the selectmen to set up a task force to study expanding the board from 3 to 5. The climate change is something very different. There's no money. It's more of a much broader policy statement. So, and at the end of the day, the same thing goes. If these kids feel strongly and they want to come to town meeting, it is their right to present their position and to have town meeting vote. I will never, ever, ever take that away from anybody. It's just a much broader policy thing. If they were asking for a specific action, it would be different. And asking us for money. That's the distinction I see between both of these. One is an action, one is just a much broader policy statement.
Bob?
No, I sort of agree with Jim and Robin that certainly the presenter has a voice and it's to be heard. I'm just looking for a way of short-circuiting a lengthy discussion. And if we can do it by saying, like we had been talking about, it's part of our plan, fine with me. I also agree that there's a distinction that Robin drew very nicely between the climate petition and this particular article for all the same reasons. So I don't think we have a choice. I don't think it's a choice. I think it's a democracy. I think he did his work. I think it makes sense. So if we can convince the students to go the other route, I mean, that'd be terrific too. To Jim's point, we need to be mindful of the safety issues that will be faced if we have elongated indoor meetings. So but Jim's point was it's a balancing act. Couldn't agree more.
So does this mean Dave Haviland has to get a gavel too?
Better get a bigger bell. That's why he needs a really gigantic Liberty bell.
He's gonna get a smaller one. He's gonna get a smaller one.
I would like to give you all gavels.
All right. So
you don't want to give me a gavel. I'll be banging it.
Robin, we're gonna go. I'm gonna suggest this motion, and there, as we said at the outset, we don't have to recommend individual. We don't have to recommend all. We don't have to recommend. But what I would like to do is to, Chris, can you give me the language again? The for the board to. We don't, so we don't have to go through. The board recommends the petitioner.
So So John, the board can do nothing. You don't have to take a motion right now. If you don't want to make any recommendations and have those posted and publicly available before town meeting, we can just leave this agenda item and move on to the next one. If the board would like to make recommendations, you could individually go through each article, or you could recommend the entire warrant, or you could recommend the entire warrant with the exception of a handful of articles that the board feels as though that they don't want to recommend.
Or still want to debate.
I would like to, Robin and Bob, I would like to leave it where we make no recommendation on anything other than Article 30, the sidewalk, which it seems everybody is in agreement that we recommend against that article. So in my motion, the motion that I would consider is the Board of Selectmen recommend no action or recommend against Article 30 and leave it there. That way we can have the conversations, the discussions, what Rob mentioned back to the petitioners, and everything else can be left to further discussion and leave it open to those discussions. How do you feel about that?
I don't like that, because there are a whole slew of other warrant articles that we all agreed on. So I think there's only a handful. So why would you just vote? Why would you just single out one?
Because it's only because it's the only
But
one.
there's also a whole lot of other ones that we all recommend that we've worked really hard on.
I think that's the implication is that's what's implied. The other articles we are in favor of. The only one that we're addressing is the one we're unanimously not in favor of.
Well, I'm not voting for that because I just don't know why you would just single out one warrant article not to vote against when I feel strongly about many of these. It seems to me that the only ones that there were discussion about are the water restriction, the climate one, and the increase to the Board of Selectmen. So you could leave those as pending. And we have a few more meetings we could discuss those on. If you're going to vote, you have to vote. And we don't all have to vote for the whole thing.
No, that's what I'm trying to do. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to segment it in a way that is clarifying and not confusing. So, Bob, what do you think?
So from where I sit, it looked to me like you would support all of the articles from 1 to 25, right?
Right.
6, Hale.
26 is being withdrawn.
Right. 27, there's still discussion.
27 is the climate emergency one. You could say, you could take no position on that because we're going to work on that. The increased membership of the Board of Selectmen, we don't have to speak to that. We could be neutral. And then we could say, we do not recommend Article 29, and we do recommend Article 30. Robin, would that work?
That works. I mean, I am happy to vote on Article 28. Everybody has the right to bring a warrant article. I would vote in favor of it.
Well,
you're voting in favor of the article, but I'm just saying that the article would just be neutral on it.
Yeah.
If people want to know how I feel, I'd say the sponsor has the right to bring it to town meeting. So I'm going to vote in favor of it.
Does the sponsor have the right to bring Article 29?
She certainly does. I just don't agree with it. I'm not telling the sponsor not to bring it to town meeting. I'm just saying that the sponsor failed to make an argument that in my mind made it a viable.
So I would come back on Article 28, Robin. We're interested parties. I would definitely stay neutral on 28.
I'm not, Bob. I
should go to 5?
Every citizen. Bob, that's not what he's recommending. The sponsor. All the sponsor wants is for us or for the town to decide to spend money to study it.
Yes, I agree, but we don't have to.
If that's what the town, what I would say is, I would stand up and say, I think the town's already addressing this. So you don't need to spend another $75.
Right.
But clearly the sponsor doesn't feel that way.
But if you don't do anything, it doesn't make a difference to that.
I literally just said that exact same thing 10 minutes ago. That's exactly what I said. So, all right.
All right, let's move this along. Why don't we just vote? Why don't we say we recommend what was it, 1 through
25. 25.
Number 27, we're going to reach out to the students and see if there's another solution.
Yep.
And then
if we don't want to do anything on number 28, whoever wants to know my position can give me a call. And on 29, I just, unless there's additional information that the sponsor has, I'm just not sold on it right now.
So, as a motion, then, we move to recommend warrant articles 1 through 25. We, as a board, recommend we will be silent or neutral on Articles 27, 28. We are against Article 29 and in favor of Article 30.
Right. And I think for 27, we're going to go back to the sponsor and just, we think there's a different avenue to pursue this.
Yep, exactly.
And so I'm just leaving it as neutral so we can just, there doesn't have to be distinction. So,
second.
And ask for a second.
I just second.
Bob seconded it.
All in favor? I, John Jeffries.
Hi, Bob Springett.
I, Robin Hunter.
Thank you all very much. Chris?
Yep. That's great. I've got everything I need. We'll get it recorded and we'll move forward. Appreciate it.
It didn't take long at all, did it?
Robust discussions about important topics.
Rob?
It's democracy.
Rob, it's good night story time.
Sorry, I have one more thing. You didn't
Are you sure? Are you sure you want to say one more thing?
Yes, I'm sure. You didn't address whether it was okay for Jim to order Article 22 in front of 21.
Yeah,
I guess you don't.
Sense. Right.
Okay.
I don't think we need to make that motion.
I don't think you have to vote on it, but I just wanted to make sure that made sense and that Jim could do that because it makes sense to us and it also determines how we write up the blue book if they're how people are going to write it up. So that's good. We're good with that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thumbs up.
Thanks, Rob.
So 1-5 we finished, John?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, and we finished 1-6, so we're at 1-7.
1-7.
All right.
Poor Kevin has been on the line listening to this and he's saying, what did I get myself into?
So, item number 7. Kevin?
Hello, Kevin.
The appointment of Kevin McCabe as Dover's Metro
Are you still awake, Kevin?
Transit Authority. MWRTA. How about that? The Metro West.
I'll second that.
Let me just read the summary before we make the motion. The Metro West Regional Transit Authority is a regional public transit authority in Massachusetts providing the bus and transportation services to communities in Metro West area, including Dover. Mr. Dwelly is requesting the board appoint DPW Director Kevin McCabe to replace him as Dover's MWRTA representative. Kevin, thank you very much for your patience, for your willingness to do this. It's like joining the French Foreign Legion. I move to approve the appointment of Kevin McCabe as Dover's Metro West Regional Transit Authority representative and ask for a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor? I, John Jeffries.
I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springett. Boy, what a way to spend the night, Kevin.
Kevin, this is the part where they put the blindfold around your eyes and they say, do you have any last words?
Well, I'll keep it short. In essence of time, through the chair, I look forward to working with other municipal leaders and seeing what possible opportunities this could present to the town of Dover.
Great. How are the first couple of weeks been, Kevin?
Good. Busy.
Yes. Yeah. We've ordered really nice weather so you can get all your landscaping and stuff out. Then we ordered a snowstorm, so you can get everything back on. Made it cold, and now we're making it nice again. So you get it all in just a span of a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah. Got a real good flavor for Dover quick.
You sure do. Thank you. Thanks. Good. It was good to see you yesterday, and thanks for everything you've done so far.
Thanks.
Bob, Robin, no comments or questions for Kevin? We good?
We're good.
Perfectly fine.
So let's go to item number 8, the Selectmen updates. 2 things from me. As I mentioned earlier, Chris and I met last week with Denise, her office, our congressman's office, with regards to the the money that's being appropriated for cities and towns. We've identified, as I mentioned earlier, the projects that Claybrook, the bridge project at Center Street, and the Willow Street Bridge. So those were the items that we spent the most time on. There is, with regards to Hale and open space, we meet next week. No updates. We're moving items along on those fronts. That's it from my side. Robin, from you?
So I do have an issue with the April 14th meeting because I will be at a wedding.
That's a happy event.
It is. I didn't realize the wedding was on a Friday night, and so there's a rehearsal dinner on Thursday. So you guys can go ahead with the meeting, or if you want to try and move it to Wednesday, whatever you want.
Robin, looking at the agenda for April 14th, are you good with just Bob and I?
I am.
And Bob, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule right now, and it looks like fairly administrative side of, except for obviously the executive session would be moved.
And the hearing, for the liquor license. Okay, I think that's all very straightforward. There's nothing there that jumps out at us that we don't have already really debated, and I don't think there's going to be any surprises in any of those items. So I'd be good with it.
Comfortable with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Bob, anything?
The construction documents are going out. They're actually published already, so I think we're planning for like a May 11th meeting to approve the general contractor, so people will be going out, reviewing the documentation, submitting bids. So that's back on, moving along.
Got it. Great, thank you. No motions from us, Chris. We're going to move right to your updates.
Great, thanks, John. Just two quick things. The first is just want to notify the board that we received $75,000 in grant funds from the state to pay for our long-term water sustainability study, which is a great grant award. I just want to thank Representative Denise Garlick for making that happen. The second piece is I'd actually just like to recognize Kate and let her speak to two items that she's been working hard on. The first is on our new volunteer webpage, and then the second is some of the great ideas she has for the board based on your conversation from last time you met regarding publicizing town meeting information in advance to town meeting.
Thanks, Chris. So I did send an email out to all board and committee chairs about the new webpage. The goal is to make the process very clear for anyone interested in volunteering or joining a board or committee, but also just having a centralized location for current members to go there and get all the documents they need, but also have extra information about training and different groups all the resources available to them. So that is really the goal. It's definitely a work in progress. I've gotten some feedback already, ways we can make it better. So yeah, definitely I think it will be very helpful. As far as my great ideas, I'm not sure if they're great yet, but I did have some ideas from our last meeting especially about trying to break down some of the complex issues in the articles for citizens. So me and Chris were talking about ways we could maybe focus on some of the more complex articles and focus on putting out some visuals using video, infographics, kind of similar to what we did with Water Wednesday. So maybe releasing a calendar and having specific days that we're going to focus on certain articles, and we can push out media on those certain days dedicated to those articles. So that was sort of my idea, and right now I'm kind of looking at all the articles. We don't have a lot of time, but I think if we dedicate one day to each article, and a lot of the articles
Standard.
are very standard. So this would really just be the ones like the reserve one where it's complicated. But we're going to focus on using visuals and video and things to be really short, but also linking to where the in-depth information is for people who want to get into the weeds about it. Another thing is taking the open hearing video and breaking it up, bookmarking it, so people can just jump to the sections that they're interested.
Nice.
I think it's a really good idea. And I really don't think that we've waited too long, because people don't focus on things until the last minute. And then they just want the sound bites for each of the articles.
So yeah, I think this is a good start. I mean, I don't know if it's going to work, but I think, we can really just attack it from all angles and,
right.
See how it goes.
No, I think we have to try a lot of different things and then see what does stick.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
And so, John, that's it. But I just want to say Kate's being modest on the volunteer website. That's a pretty awesome piece of work. We typically judge ourselves against what other communities are doing, and I'd say that the landscape out there, we're certainly leading the way in terms of centralizing our resources and information for both current and prospective volunteers. So I just I want to underscore how I think helpful and great that piece of work is, and I think it'll be something that other communities emulate.
We should charge them money if they're making up ideas or a lawsuit. The page is nice. It's a nice, clean page.
And there's definitely room for improvement. So I'm definitely taking feedback, and it will only get better. So
just say, Kate, just say it's a beta. We're going to work on it.
It's a beta. Okay.
There you go.
Listen to Techno Bob. Yeah.
Could be an alpha for all I know. I mean,
Hey, Kate, when do they realize that, you get paid for every click, right?
I thought about putting ads on there, yes.
See, that's where we're talking. Now we're talking. Thanks, Kate. Chris, anything else?
That's it, John. Thanks.
Thank you. The consent agenda, item C1. Design contract with Gale & Associates for the townhouse roof replacement. May 30th, Farm Trail Run. Triathlon in September. The one-day liquor licenses for about 15 or 16 or 17 cocktail parties that Robin did not get invited to.
Yeah, but she's going to the wedding. We're not even going to the wedding.
And I was at spring break in Miami, so there was a lot of alcohol flowing.
I'm sure there were.
Boy, Powysset Farm is going to be busy, huh?
It really is.
Well, it is already busy. They have all kinds of really fun things there.
Yeah.
Lots of really cool things. Really cool. Really cool. The trail run is always a great day, great take. So please look at the website, familiarize yourself with some of the cool things that are happening. Lots of cool things in the spring to take advantage of. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented and ask for a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, John Jeffries.
Aye, Robin Hunter.
Aye, Bob Springer.
Thank you all very, very, very much. Any other items? Comments? Bob, Robin?
Time for adjournment, I believe.
I move to adjourn. Ask for a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye, John Jeffries.
Aye, Robin Hunter.
Aye, Bob Springer. Good night, all. Thank you very much. Enjoy the warm weather that's coming up.
It's raining.
Yeah, but that's tonight. Going forward.
I don't know. It was 80 degrees in Miami.
Bob, she's rubbing Miami in big time. She is just
Yeah,
rubbing
definitely.
it.
I do remember being in Puerto Rico, it was the same. All
Cheers.
right, folks, have a wonderful night.